Aotearoa, and welcome to Friday's Economy Watch, where we follow the economic events and trends that affect Aotearoa. I'm David Chaston, and this is the international edition from interest.co.nz. And today we lead with news. Bankrupt US Israeli decisions to choose war over peaceful pressure are having global consequences. But first, the Federal Reserve Beige Book for February reported that overall US economic activity increased at a slight to moderate pace in 7 of the 12 Federal Reserve districts, while the number of districts reporting flat or declining activity increased from 4 in the prior period to 5 in the current period. This is not a review that found strong growth. US jobless claims rose last week by 18,000 from the prior week to 213,000, but most of that can be accounted for by seasonal factors. There are now 2.21 million people on these benefits, similar to this time last year, but significantly higher than the 2024 levels. February announced job cuts were lower than in January, but together the first 2 months have been almost as high as their equivalent 2025 levels. This survey also tracks hiring plans, and that is down more than 50% from last year. Tomorrow, the February US non-farm payrolls report will be released, and analysts expect a low 59,000 jobs gain. That would be half the 130,000 January gain, itself historically low. According to AAA monitoring, average petrol prices in the US are now $3.25 a gallon. That's up 9% from a week ago, up 12.5% from a month ago. US natural gas prices are up 7.2% over the same time frame, but to be fair, they're still very low. But in Europe, these prices are up 70%, in the UK, up 53% in Germany, for example. In India, natural gas prices have tripled for many users over the past few days. It is natural to wonder what Trump would say if the EU, or India, took unilateral actions that impose similar cost jumps on the US. It is no longer safe to be a friend of the US or any country that pursues policies that, quote, put me first, unquote. American policymakers are scrambling to assess the wide range of materials where access is at risk, and institutions more broadly are doing the same. We need to start keeping a closer eye on supply chain pressures. The New York Fed's February monitoring shows it elevated, but nothing like the pandemic period, although not yet accounting for the current stresses. Taiwanese industrial production rose 28.5% in January from a year ago, not surprising given the export order data we've been noting, but it is their sharpest rise in at least a decade, probably longer. However, things are not positive for Taiwanese retail sales. They actually decreased in January. But this was entirely due to the Chinese New Year falling in a different period this year. Singapore retail sales data for January also got twisted by the same holiday timing. The Malaysian central bank kept its policy rate unchanged overnight at 2.75%, saying inflation there is well contained. But they are worried about Middle East conflict effects. And China said it's lowering its growth targets slightly. Premier Li is set to announce a 4.5% to 5% target while delivering the government work report, a key policy document, at the opening session of the National People's Congress later today. The departure from the around 5% growth target for the past 3 years signals the start of a period of slower expansion in China. And a big focus there will be on stabilising their moribund real estate markets. Stabilising will undoubtedly mean subsidies and incentives to unlock buyer interest in the sector again. That will be a hard ask, given the widespread pain still in recent memory there. EU retail sales rose 2.3% in January, although slightly less in the euro area. In Australia, household spending rose 4.6% in January from a year ago, but that was its slowest pace since late May, following a 5% rise in December. This was a smaller increase than expected. And global container freight rates, which have been falling every week in 2026 so far, turned 3% higher last week as the early signs of the Middle East pressure start to mount. Outbound China rates are up 10% for the week. However, they are still 23% lower than year-ago levels. It might be different when this current week's data is released next week, of course. More currently, bulk cargo rates are up 6% for the week. Shipping traffic in the Straits of Hormuz has ceased altogether, and we should note that ships outside the strait are under attack too, so the conflict stresses are spreading. New Zealand and Australia have significant food exports into the Middle East region, and they are now disrupted. We noted the sharp rise in fertiliser costs yesterday, and more broadly, that is bringing warnings of food shortage consequences. And as if these crises aren't enough, overshadowed is the Blue Owl private credit car crash in the US and the wider concerns about their risky loans. Some insiders are now talking about a consequential bank run being caused by this. The US Treasury 10-year yield is now just on 4.14%, up 6 basis points from yesterday, and the price of gold will start today down $71 from yesterday at $5,076 an ounce. Silver is down $2 at $82 an ounce. American oil prices are up more than $5.50 today, up 7% in a day, at just under $79.50 a barrel, while the international Brent price is up the same, now just on $84.50 a barrel. And the Kiwi dollar is down 40 basis points against the US dollar from yesterday, now just on 58.9 US cents. Against the Aussie, we're up 20 basis points at 84.1 Australian cents. We're down 30 basis points against the yen. Against the euro, we're down 10 basis points at 50.9 euro cents. That all means our trade-weighted index starts today down 30 basis points, now just over 62.6. And the Bitcoin price starts today at $71,316 and down 2.6% from yesterday, although holding on to a large part of yesterday's rise. Volatility over the past 24 hours has been moderate, at just on plus or minus 2.1%. You can get more news affecting the economy in New Zealand from interest.co.nz. Kia ora, I'm David Chaston. We'll do this again tomorrow.